I want to talk about my first impressions of a game called Panzer Paladin, which comes from a game studio called Tribute. I think they're based in Montreal. I like some of their other games, but I'll talk about that a bit later. Basically, it's a side-scroller pixel art game that borrows a lot from the old Mega Man games, especially in terms of the art style and characters and everything. The big hook in terms of the main mechanics are that you can switch from a little tiny human-sized character and a big mech robot thing. They have different abilities, different amounts of health, and different weapons and all that kind of stuff. So, jumping right into it, I want to talk about some of the problems I've had with it so far and how it's frustrated me. The problems fall into two big categories. One is the visuals and the presentation of the game, and then the other side is the actual gameplay. So in terms of the visuals, I will say that it's still nice to look at. I do enjoy looking at Panzer Paladin. The intro sequence is pretty short, and the cutscenes feature animation that's clearly, cycled, and I think that's an artistic choice to mimic those games of the era, like 80s games, maybe NES games specifically, where they didn't have a ton of money to animate. They did what they did with the technology they had, and that was it. As long as it got the point across, it was fine. And I know for a fact that Tribute can do really fantastic animation, so I'm guessing this is a choice and not just that they wanted to cheap out in any way. Anyway, all these visual aspects for me pale in comparison to one of Tribute's previous games called Flinthook, which I only discovered very recently, but I love it. I love it a lot, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later. But one of my favorite aspects of that game, of Flinthook, is visuals and animation, even from the intro sequence all the way to the animations of your character while you're playing, the character designs of the monsters, everything. Not getting that same level of intricacy and care, at least that's the way it feels to me. I'm a little bit let down, I guess, by that, or at the very least, it doesn't quite do it for me. It doesn't really set itself apart as something very different. It just looks like a lot of other pixel art stuff, and that's just kind of sad. It's not necessarily, it's not an objectively bad thing or anything. The visuals are nice, but just not exactly what I would prefer. Now, in terms of the gameplay, I have a few more complaints in this area, and on the one hand, there are just these immediate inconveniences that, again, might be there as very specific choices to homage games of this era from the 80s and old side-scrollers and stuff. For example, the checkpoints are pretty far apart, at least in my opinion. Another problem is that if you arrive at a checkpoint but your mech guy has died by that point, you can't activate that checkpoint, which is frustrating because then you get pulled back to the last one. In turn, if you need to stop playing the game before you've completed a level, then you will definitely have to start the whole level over again the next time you hop on. I know that Shovel Knight does this as well, and a ton of other games that are trying to mimic old NES side-scrollers and stuff. I don't think it's enjoyable to do this. If that's the reason they're doing it, I don't think it's a good reason. I don't enjoy having to repeat parts of the level that aren't especially exciting, especially if I've already figured out any puzzles and things and know how to deal with enemies. It just feels like it's wasting my time, and I don't enjoy that very much. Next up, based on that central mechanic of, you switch between these two characters, essentially. At first, in watching the trailers, I thought, okay, this is about player choice. This is about having options when you play. Based on your play style, you can decide in any given part of the game whether you want to be this agile, small character or the big tank-like mech monster guy. And, it makes sense. Like, okay, if you're more of a strategic player, then play the small character. And if you are just kind of a tank and you just want to hit your head into enemies and beat stuff up and take some damage, you can be the big mech guy. But so far, it doesn't seem to be that way. It doesn't seem that the purpose of this mechanic is to give the player a choice between these two styles of play at any given moment. It seems more like an element of weird puzzle solving, because there are, at least so far in only just a few levels, I have encountered multiple platforming situations where you just can't get past a certain part without the big robot guy. He can jump higher, and even then, only if he has certain types of weapons that allow him to do this upward jump attack thing. So, if I happen to mess up and I have to be the smaller character who doesn't have a lot of health at all, can't jump very far, and has a weapon that doesn't do as much damage, I can even just get completely stuck where I can't even make it to a platform, and I'll have to take a bunch of damage to get to the next thing because I can't jump high or far enough. And that's also very frustrating, especially when you're playing a character with not a lot of health. Another instance of it kind of ties into the checkpoint thing is that I was playing a level, doing pretty well, and I wound up at this tricky spot. The big robot died. The Megazord went away. I couldn't recharge him because they only give you a chance to recharge it partially every once in a while, and I couldn't do it. So I went along as the smaller character. I beat up a bunch of enemies. It was great. I was doing a great job. I was managing to do the platforming okay, even though I had to take some damage. And I got to the checkpoint right in front of the boss room, and I said, great, okay, I'll just save here, and then when I get respawned after I inevitably die, I have the robot again, and I'm starting from scratch, and it'll be fine. But since I didn't have the robot, I couldn't activate the checkpoint. So when I did in fact die to the boss, I got sent back all the way to the first checkpoint in the level. So more repetition and disappointment at the idea that, at least in my experience, it doesn't seem like switching between the two characters is about choice at all. It's just about, oh, you need to know when you need to use which character here, and you need to remember to save a certain weapon so that you can jump up to this platform in this part of the level, so don't break that weapon because they all break. I don't know. That is sad to me. It's sad to me that it's just like, you will know exactly when, once you get to a certain part of the level, you'll know exactly when to use which character and which character the developers want you to use there, and you don't have any other options, really. Not significant options. It might change, I guess, in some of the other levels, but so far, it definitely seems like it's actually a very limiting mechanic. All of those problems I have with the gameplay combine into this feeling, combine into my impression of the game's difficulty overall, which it's not. I'm glad it has different difficulty settings for sure. I've been playing between easy and normal because I just want to finish it. I just want to see all of it, and then I can go back and challenge myself. With these frustrating elements that aren't necessarily an inherent part of the gameplay, playing it has become difficult for me. And here's the thing with running into difficulty in games. If the difficulty really comes 100% from the gameplay itself and the central mechanics of the game, I am willing to throw myself at hard levels over and over and over and over and over if I am motivated by how good that gameplay feels from moment to moment and the presentation and visuals of that game. For example, Cuphead does this really well. The visual presentation pulls me back in, and the gameplay itself is solid. A game like Enter the Gungeon is pretty tough, especially early on, but the character models and animations and environments and the enemies are so great and fun, and the guns are wild and crazy, and the gameplay is still fun. It's solid. It makes a lot of sense. So it'll keep me coming back over and over and over. Another one that I want to bring up specifically based on their checkpoints is Blasphemous, which is, yeah, it is a tough game. It is a tough pixel art 2D side-scrolling game, and it can be frustrating just in terms of having to throw yourself at a lot of these enemies and figuring out their moves and stuff. It can be tough, and the bosses are really tough too. But you know what? When you find a checkpoint, and they are still pretty far apart, you get it. No matter what, as long as you make it there, you have activated the checkpoint and you're good to go. And they always, always, always put a checkpoint right in front of the boss room so that you can keep fighting the boss. If you die, you can go right back in. It's so nice when developers just say, okay, the challenge is the game itself, not in whether you're willing to redo huge portions of a level. That's the core frustration I have with all of Panzer Paladin so far, with all the different aspects, is that I don't feel that I'm going to be motivated to keep trying the stuff, just because I'm not being motivated in terms of the gameplay and the presentation to keep coming back and get better at it. I want to see the rest of the game, and I really, really like Tribute, and I bought this mostly because I just wanted to give them more money, and I want to see them do really cool games like they have in the past. And so far, it's not doing it for me. It just doesn't seem like it's clicking with me as much as I want to keep going back and keep hacking away at all this stuff. There's not as much motivation there as I would like to keep me engaged and to keep me coming back around. Okay, that's it. I have talked long enough for sure. So that's all. I know the game's basically brand new, so who knows? There might be some updates. I might change my mind about all of this, in which case I will let you know. My many, many viewers, I will let you know all about how my opinions changed and how they've made it better. But for now, these are my sticking points with it, and I wanted to talk about them, especially if there's some folks out there who have similar tastes as me and get frustrated by similar things in games. Then I wanted to put this out there just so you know what you're getting into, and that it's not quite as convenient as a bunch of other modern games in this genre. Please tell me about your experiences with it if you have played the game, and bye.